Hey everybody, I want to talk to my cynics and my pessimists out there. I am one of you. I feel you. That's kind of been my thing in the past, and especially for people who have the anxiety gene, it's easy to catastrophize everything and look at the world around us and have a pessimistic outlook, especially when we magnify the extent of bad occurrences and things like that. But I want to talk about optimism, and I want to talk about how we can change that pessimism, change the cynicism that we feel, the thing that's a default for some of us, the thing that we want to go to all the time because it's that safe place, and turn it into optimism, and ideally make us so that we can continually improve and get better over time. Uh, because I get it. I understand why people look at pessimism or cynicism, and they kind of think the worst a lot of times, or they feel like the worst outcome is the most likely scenario. Because I mean, think about it. It's the perfect solution. You're never wrong, or at least you're never let down. If you're right, then you're right and you're justified in your belief, and you can defend it with your ego. And if you're wrong, you're pleasantly surprised. So what could be better? It's a win-win to be pessimistic and cynical. So why be an optimist? Why do that? Well, because if we're pessimists and we're cynics, then we tend to atrophy, and we tend to get frustrated. We tend to get into this downward spiral of anxiety and fear and depression that continues to let us down. So we have to fight that urge, and we have to be vulnerable in order to continuously improve, in order to get better as people, in order to love, and in order to be productive members of society. We have to have an optimistic spirit. And what does pessimism and cynicism do for us? Well, first of all, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you're going to believe the worst in things, you're not going to be out on the outlook. You're not going to be looking out for things that might occur that are beneficial. You're not going to be susceptible to luck, because you're going to be blind to it. If you're always thinking the worst of something, or always thinking the worst of things, then you're not going to open your mind or your heart to the good things, to the serendipity, to the luck that occurs in our world. And there's lots of that. There's lots of those things. Optimism, on the other hand, it opens your mind to lucky occurrences. Therefore, I mean, the luckiest people in the world are optimists, because they believe, that they're lucky, that they believe that good things are happening to them, and as people say, that life is happening for them and not to them. So it gives us that optimism, that optimistic outlook, gives us that ability to look forward and believe in ourselves and believe in the things, and it gives us that elasticity to grow and continue to do that. So it's also a muscle. It's something we need to work on. Just like if we're continuing to give ourselves a pessimistic or cynical view of the world, that's going to condition ourselves to continually be that way. So we have to continue to fight that. We have to continue to fight that urge, and there's a few steps that we can do that to build that muscle. That allows us to continue to be adaptable in those situations. I especially in this time that we're living in, where there's just a lot of challenge for everybody. It's there's nobody immune to the challenges that are out there right now, and everybody's facing their own, and they're facing it in their own ways. It's easy to look at the world in a pessimistic light and look at it in a cynical way, and it's easy to kind of get drawn into that. But especially now, it's that time when we need to have that optimistic attitude. I to give an example, a restaurant example, there's restaurants and the hospitality industry are struggling the most, or some of the people that are struggling the most right now. But you hear these stories about how we adapt. Initially, when we say we have to close down restaurants because we can't be that close together, there's this sense of doom where, how can we survive? How can we continue to grow? How can we continue to work or keep our people employed? But our ability to adapt in these circumstances is amazing as long as we open our mind to that adaptation. I've heard of people since people aren't able to drive down the streets in a row of restaurants. The city has allowed restaurants to open up their patios into the street so they can serve the same number of customers as they would have otherwise. These are creative solutions that come out of challenge. As long as we have that optimistic attitude, it opens our mind to the possibilities of luck and things like that. So it makes us highly adaptable to have that optimistic attitude. So I ask you this question because as somebody who's had anxiety myself, what is the explanatory style that you are used to? Are you used to explaining things in a catastrophic way? Are you used to explaining things to yourself in a way that's demoralizing or cynical or pessimistic? If something bad happens, if you experience something, are you blaming it on yourself? Are you treating yourself like a shithead? Are you blaming it on the world around you or anything like that? Or are you explaining it in such a way that it's not personal, pervasive, or what's the other one? It's pervasive, personal, and gosh darn it, I'm gonna remember it after this thing. But anyway, so that you need to explain. Are you explaining it in that sort of light? If you are, again, it's a muscle to train yourself. Are you to adapt and change it to an optimistic style of looking at it? That it's not a permanent situation. That was the other one. That it's not permanent, pervasive, or personal. So when we kind of start to explain things to ourselves or situations to ourselves in an optimistic way, and I'm not saying that we need to put rose-colored glasses on bad situations, because situations are often bad, and we have to address the reality. Everything has to be grounded in reality. But as long as we're grounded in reality and practicing optimism, then we can be, then we can move forward productively. But if we're explaining to ourselves situations in a more optimistic and non-pessimistic way, we're having less feelings of helplessness. We're focusing on things that we can control rather than what we can't control. And that's what the pessimistic or cynical way of looking at things really does, is it's focusing on what's out of our control and realizing that there's nothing that we can do about it. But the great thing about optimism is recognizing that there are things that are out of our control and that we can change or we can control certain things, and we focus intently on that. So instead of explaining yourself in a pessimistic way, situations, ask yourself the quality questions. Ask yourself if this is actually true. And as it's been said in the past, ask yourself if it is permanent, pervasive, or personal. Is it reflecting in all areas of life? Are we in that bad of a situation? And then find the proof that the alternative throughout your history, throughout reference points, is there evidence to suggest that we've been able to get through challenges like this? I know at the beginning, if we experience something that brings us down and we catastrophize things, we tend to believe that it's going to be drawn out forever. But picture yourself in a situation where things were challenging and that you got through it and that you made it through. If you bring yourself into those situations, it might change it. And that cuts off the catastrophizing. The goal is to break that pattern of catastrophe and bring ourselves back into a point of saying something that's more positive about it, in terms of, yes, this is a challenge now, but here's how I will grow from it, or here's what I can do to control this outcome. Focus on the specific things that you can change instead of the general things that you can't. Because making broad generalizations is never a good thing. And we're living in a world of generalizations, and we need to be more specific and surgical about those things. So it's for this reason alone, that right now has never been a better time to be optimistic. Right now, when it's the most challenging. Because we can't we just can't right now as a society, as a group of people who perhaps have a collective anxiety. We can't let ourselves sink into pessimism or cynicism. We have to look at optimistic outlooks. We have to look at the bright horizons, control the things that we can, and to continue to persist on the path toward making that outcome, the positive outcome, a reality. So stay well, my friends, and stay optimistic, because there's a lot of good reasons to be optimistic, regardless of what we're going through. And as always, you can reach out. I'm always happy to talk or anything like that. But in the meantime, take care and stay positive. Thanks.